I'm going to get a piece of pizza tomorrow, and I'm not getting any mushrooms on it. Hey everybody, I wanted to talk a little bit about The Last of Us and music. You know, The Last of Us is currently on HBO. I'm enjoying it. I've watched the first 4 episodes. Some things I didn't like about it, but overall I thought it was really, really well done. And I also played the first video game. But you know, one of the details that's to come, and I think in The Last of Us 2, is a Taylor guitar, and Taylor's even issued Last of Us Special Edition guitar, which is I think a 314 CE. It looks like kind of a nice guitar. Of course, the 314 CE is just flat out a really nice guitar. But I think it was kind of interesting because it seems like The Last of Us is kind of trying to use that guitar maybe to remind us a little bit of how precious music is, and maybe how much we take it for granted. And that guitar is sort of like this fossil specimen, this vestige of the world that collapsed. Was it in 2003? And now we're in 2023, and 20 years of the zombie apocalypse. By the way, having watched that movie and several of the documentaries about the science behind it, or I guess science, I've decided I no longer like mushrooms on my pizza. And I used to sometimes get an appetizer at a couple places around my house of those fried mushrooms, which are really great with horseradish sauce. And I'm suddenly not too interested in eating them anymore. When they spout out of your face like that and you turn into a clicker, that's got to be bad. But you know, it is kind of interesting because I think that guitar, it's just kind of a little detail, but it shows that, you know, it's a symbol of humanity and our humanity, and music is part of what makes us human. And the fungus is sort of biology just in its rawest form, and humanity is, you know, arguably something bigger than just biology, you know, and music is one of the best ways to remind us of how precious our humanity is, which in some ways, you know, I would argue goes really beyond science itself. The love we have for one another, the relationships, the beauty we build, and music is sort of a great symbol. So what a great little device they inserted into the story to kind of remind us of humanity. I was kind of wondering now, we have a vintage guitar market, and I'm assuming in 2023, a nice Taylor like that would probably be kind of a rare commodity. I'm assuming the Taylor factory stopped working in 2003 when the zombie apocalypse occurred. So we take all that for granted, everybody. All these nice guitars. Don't ever. You know, the things we take, that's one of the things when I watched that movie, I really came away with what we take for granted. And if there's a serious element to what is hopefully just kind of a wild dystopian zombie apocalypse movie, it's to remind us of how precious our relationships are, how precious our world is, all the little comforts of our life we take for granted, especially in this part of the world, and also our humanity. And I think music goes to all 3 of those things. Our relationships, you know, music exists in a social context. Music reflects the history of tools. You know, the guitars now are so well made, and also music is sort of a language, and it's a tradition we pass on. You know, and that Joel plays a little guitar and he tries to show Ellie some guitar, you know, but it seems like it's going to be kind of a hard task but if you think about it, this is a world where most people probably can't play the guitar, and if you keep that up, the people alive probably won't even have guitars to play, and if they did, they wouldn't know how to play them. We have I guess my point was we have a vintage guitar market now. That's an extreme case. In the case of a zombie apocalypse, would a nice Taylor like that become priceless? You know, like a Stradivarius violin or a Da Vinci painting or something? Or would it be junk that nobody wanted? I mean, who has time to bother with a guitar, And all these nice guitars that we kind of ooh and ah over might just end up being junk, and 3 people out of 1,000 would even care, about it. And maybe that's what'll happen to the vintage market when we're all gone. Maybe younger people won't care about 59 Gibsons and old Strats and Tellys from the 50s. But anyway, it's certainly an interesting film, and that did remind me a little bit of all the things we take for granted, including music and all the components that go into making music. And in the zombie apocalypse, in The Last of Us, you can't really even see anybody play. And just think how limiting that would be. So the precious things about our lives that make music so vital in our world are things that we should cherish. And one of them is that social context, where we play music in a social context. I guess, think about it, if you lived in The Last of Us, a zombie apocalypse, or maybe if you lived on a desert island, would you still play music? I think I would. If I just somehow ended up being shipwrecked on a desert island with a nice guitar, I think I'd still play it. But you have to admit that part of why we play music is to share with others. And music is a language, and it's a form of communication. So if you're by yourself, that you sort of lose the communication aspect, which I would argue is a vital part of music, and part of the point of music is to communicate your thoughts, feelings, and to others. I mean, that's a big part of what music is. So if in a world where there's no real social structure to receive that, the language of music might kind of have trouble getting out there. The other thing that I kind of thought watching that is sex and love. And if you think about it, music is part of sex and love. And I don't just mean that there's a lot of sexy songs and a lot of love songs, which there are. But if you think about it in a more serious way, music is a language. And I've always thought music comes from the same part of our humanity. There's that idea of humanity again, that does love people. And we're not just a bag of chemicals, and the love we have for others is not just some chemical reaction that someday they'll be able to explain in a laboratory. It's something kind of mysterious and wonderful about our human connections with one another. And music's very much a part of that story of love. It's part of historically, courtship, dancing, all those things are very important in the history of music, and they're very tied up with sex and love. But one thing I noticed about The Last of Us, it was kind of asexual. I noticed that playing the video game. Now, I guess if you think about it, a woman probably, I don't know, would she want to get pregnant in the zombie apocalypse? That might be kind of tough. Of course, people got pregnant in primitive times, I guess. But I don't know, so that's the obvious reason is you probably want to avoid pregnancy in that situation. But I did notice a couple of their relationships that did have a kind of a sexual overtone were same-sex ones. And I was thinking about some of the older zombie movies I could think of. One of them was the Omega Man with Charlton Heston, and I was actually thinking of the one in 1964 that was done with Vincent Price, which was based on the Richard Matheson novel I Am Legend. And I think they've done that movie a couple times. And it's kind of a similar story. It's the world's turned into zombies or vampires, and there's one guy left. But he meets a woman, and so one of the sort of large sections of the plot, about 2/3 of the way through, he meets a woman, and there's some sense that this is a way maybe we could kickstart humanity. And I noticed when they had a chance to introduce a romantic relationship, they kind of shied away from it. And, if you think about it, studies have shown that younger people don't have as much sex as people like maybe in the 60s or 70s. I'm not just speaking about sex, drugs, and rock and roll, but just healthy human, relations and everything. I think studies have shown that. I was talking to some younger people the other day, and I was telling them about David Cassidy, and my sister used to love David Cassidy and Donny Osmond, and I guess people a little older than I am, their sisters probably loved John and Paul in that kind of teeny bopper way. I mean, we all love John and Paul, but I mean in that kind of teeny bopper way. And I said, yeah, David Cassidy, people used to, he used to do concerts, and there'd be 10,000 13-year-old girls there, and the whole place would be maybe 5% men, and those would be the fathers of all these daughters, and they'd just be screaming, passing out, and they almost couldn't believe it. Like, really, that kind of. But sometimes it seems like the sex and the wholesome love element of our society is diminishing. I don't know. Studies have sort of shown that. I don't really know if they're true, and that's really not my point. But I did notice in The Last of Us, it seemed like kind of an asexual world, and I was thinking about some of the other disaster movies I've seen where they sort of at the end would have an Adam and Eve type couple where you get a sense that they're going to start the human race again and reproduce. Another one like that was that movie Deep Impact about an asteroid hitting the Earth, and you have a kind of a young guy, young, like 15, and a girl, and at the end, you kind of realize that they're going to help to repopulate the Earth, and I was watching The Last of Us, and I thought, maybe these people are just going to run around from zombies, and then they'll all die. It doesn't look like there are any kids in this world, any human reproduction, and I think that sort of goes to music in a way because music's such an important part of the story of love and relationships. And like I said, I do think music is part of what we would call our humanity. And the other thing is skills. I think I alluded to this when I talked about being at that camp and watching all those counselors that some of them played the guitar quite well. But, you have to learn guitar from somebody. And in The Last of Us, the few guitar players left are going to get older and older and rustier because it didn't look like there were too many guitars around that were possible to play, just apparently that one Taylor. I wonder if Taylor paid them to put that in the movie, like that's called product placement. I have a feeling they probably did. That was product placement, but it was actually kind of an effective one because I think it really represents something powerful. But you wonder, okay, we see one guitar there, maybe a couple others, but that looked like it was about it. And, anyone that knows guitar, they're going to get rustier and rustier because they can't sit around and play all the time. And also, nobody new is going to learn, And think about it, whether you've had lessons, maybe you went to music school, maybe you're a guitar performance major from a really good music academy, whatever. If you play the guitar pretty well, I feel certain that there are people in your life that guided you along the way to becoming a better guitar player or musician, at whatever you play or sing. And they might not have, sometimes that can just be people you play with. I know I learned a lot just by playing with people that were better than I was, and you'd start to pick up things. But I also would point to, just times they weren't necessarily even formal lessons. But, when I was a kid, I'd just say, hey, how are you doing that? And, and some guy would go, oh, here's how you do it. And, those are memories that as you get older, you realize those were really significant times. Sometimes you don't always realize it when it was happening. But just think how much we take that for granted. The people in our lives that show us things or just do things that we can see, and what an impoverished world culturally it would be, not just economically. And, you're living in rags and everything, but what a culturally impoverished world it would be without people who could play music. And you would just watch anyone around that could play music start to die off, and really it would be back to square one. I guess they say the earliest types of music were drums and little flutes and things, maybe that would start again. But all the excellence of musical instruments that we've produced, that's the product of hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years of technology. It's not just music, it's technology. You know, how you make things out of wood and animal materials. You know, they used to make instruments out of horn and bone and trees, you know, little sticks and things for flutes, reeds. You come out of that to what we have today, these excellent guitars. And you know, guitars are a lot better now than they were when I was a kid. You know, maybe when I was a kid, I didn't have a great guitar. Maybe you've seen me talk about the guitar I had when I was a kid. But I even think, like, if you had a nice Fender or Gibson or Martin or something back in the 60s, it might be a really great guitar, but I wouldn't be surprised if in some ways the guitars that they've made in the last 20 years are better than those vintage guitars, other than the fact that you don't have some of the aging of the wood and the mellowing of a guitar that comes around when it gets older. But the guitars today, I'm assuming, will do that too. So just pound per pound, I wouldn't be surprised if the guitars today are better than they used to be. And all that's a product of thousands of years of a musical evolution and technology, because that's not just sitting around playing scales. Those are people that really know how to work with wood and other materials and how to calibrate things. And what we've got today is something we all take for granted. I know I do too. And when I was watching that, I just thought, man, there's so much we take for granted. And you really realize it. And, there are probably parts of the world today where guitars are rare. Well, there are parts of the world where guitars are rare, good guitars. And we even take things for granted relative to our own time, let alone living in some god-awful time when... Did you see those clickers that those fungal plates just burst out of their head, so their head splits open? And then they're blind, but they... Oh, my God. They have a good sense of hearing, though. But, just watching that... Oh, the other thing is that's kind of like that is hearing melodies. I noticed in the show they used a little device of over the radio. They have like communication between these kind of different groups, underground groups, that are kind of trying to fight for domination of what's left of humanity. And they have a little radio code. A 60s song means it's kind of, I guess everything's okay. 70s song is be on the lookout, and the 80s song means there's trouble ahead. So you didn't want to hear an 80s song. That was always bad. I noticed they didn't put a 90s song in there. And another thing is, I wonder today what the common songs would be. So that assumes sort of a common song. Everybody knows these songs. So, like, what are the songs that everybody knows? You probably know songs. I probably know songs. But what are the songs everybody knows? Like older generations, probably everybody knew You Are My Sunshine. Everybody knew America the Beautiful. Everybody knew Red River Valley. And, I sometimes think the songs that everybody knows kind of dry up around the 80s. I know after 9/11, the terrible September 11th in the World Trade Center, they looked around for patriotic songs that everybody knew, and there weren't many. I think the newest song they did was that Lee Greenwood, God Bless the USA, which was not all that well known, actually, but it was a recent one. But other than that, they were doing the old 100-year-old favorites, God Bless America, however old that one is, and then like America the Beautiful. And you think about it, that's a shared musical culture, and I think we're losing that today, even though we don't live in a Last of Us dystopian type zombie infested universe, thank goodness. But I still think we're losing some of these things today, like the social connections that nourish music. Who knows? Some people say that I was watching Philip McKnight, and he said, he thinks that maybe years from now people will see that the guitars were better before COVID, and they're going to keep getting worse. I guess since COVID, some people say the quality control on guitars is not what it used to be. It's not, and who knows? Maybe if we keep slipping and slipping, maybe our guitars will keep getting worse and we won't notice it. But then one day we'll look around and go, man, those guitars in 2010 were awesome. And it's hard to find one like that today. The intonation's not great. But just imagine a zombie apocalypse. So you got one Taylor. Thank goodness it was a Taylor, because I do think it probably held its tune. Wonder if he broke a string. That would be bad. You imagine breaking a string on the last guitar on the face of the earth that played. So I imagine there are guitars around that are all busted up, So, but it got me thinking, and it made me think about the things we take for granted, which go to music. Well, how lucky we are to live in a world with so many great guitars and such a rich musical culture. Never take that for granted. The shared musical knowledge we have. And I sometimes think we're losing that even just in our own comfortable 2023 way. We're losing some of those things, and that would be a shame. Our shared musical culture, our skill set. I think studies have shown a lot of younger people, they don't take piano lessons. My grandma always said every kid should have a few piano lessons, and I think in her generation, most people could kind of, or at least a lot of people, at least where she was from, could kind of, find middle C, maybe play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star or something, but they had some exposure to the piano. And that even just a few lessons or something makes a big difference the rest of your life. And it made me think about how precious music is in terms of our humanity. And you look at that world where all those people that lost their humanity and turned into mushroom people. Did you ever see that movie I think it was in that Japanese movie where they go to an island, and on the island they start eating the mushrooms and turning into mushrooms. That's a good one if you want to see that one. And I think the mushrooms kind of give you a high too. But anyway, I thought about our humanity and how much a part of our musical expression and our appreciation of music is a part of this thing that makes us human, distinctly human. That does separate us in a way that I truly believe is real from animals and things. I'm not saying animals don't have music of sorts. Who knows? Who knows what animals are like? But we do have a human spirit that communicates, that loves, and that can express things in very sophisticated languages. And there's a few languages more nuanced and powerful than music. And music is such an important part of our human experience. And you look at that world where people were just struggling to retain any little shred of humanity they had, even with other people who hadn't been infected. You turn into like a brutish animal, and the people would probably be just decent people you would have just hung around with and talked to. Hey, how you doing? You turn into these brutal people that will just murder, kill, steal, anything to survive. And we just take so much for granted. And don't kid yourself. I don't know about that fungal infection, but societies do break down. And music's our tradition of music, and maybe in the West, we have a wonderfully evolved system of music. Truly, call it Western music if you want to call it that, but it's a highly evolved system of music. It got here over thousands of years. And you look at the brutishness that quickly emerges when you lose that kind of setting of civilization to kind of nurture it, and how brutish. And you think that's probably how people were in primitive times, and that's why forming communities that loved and supported each other was always so important. We always need to keep community, love, and music's very much a part of that. So I don't know, in a weird way, I just kind of was watching that and seeing some little blurbs about the Taylor guitar. What an interesting little metaphor. And that guitar would be precious in that world. And what a great symbol of our humanity that will live on, we hope. But, a little hanging by a little shred. Here's a guitar. It's part of this world of it must have seemed like a dream fantasy of heaven, to someone living after that fungal outbreak, thinking about how things were that they all took for granted. But music is one of the things that we should never take for granted, and all the things beyond just moving your fingers and learning scales that make music possible. And we have such great music today, and certainly historically, it's just such a legacy of music. And you look at that world where it all kind of went down the tubes, it sounded like it happened in a week, right? The fungal outbreak. Didn't he say at one point it started on Friday and by Monday the world had kind of was basically like it is, everyone was going crazy. Play your guitar, and every once in a while when you play it, just think of all the things that went into making that guitar possible. Sure, the factory, the workers, the company that made it, and had the specific knowledge to do it, but also just the whole economy, the society, the culture, the tradition, the market for it. All that's part of a complex network of things that make music possible. And it's something that is wonderfully human. And when I watched that show, I thought of it over and over again. Thanks. God bless. I'm going to get a piece of pizza tomorrow. And I'm not getting any mushrooms on it. I think I'm not going to have any more mushrooms. And the next time my feet get a little itchy, I'm going to buy the strongest antifungal cream I can. I wonder what would happen if you put some of that jock itch cream on one of those clickers. I don't think it would have much of an effect. I'm just assuming. Wouldn't that be funny if the whole time all you really needed to do was hold down one of those clickers and put some jock itch cream or athlete's foot powder, some Detract on his head, and he'd just go, hey, Joe, how you doing? Where have I been the last 12 years? Why am I wearing these rags? How come I have this white powder all over my head? And you say, well, you were a clicker, Bill, but thank goodness we put some antifungal ointment from the drugstore on your head, and now you're all better. Wouldn't it be funny if the whole time that was the answer? Get some Detract foot powder and pour it on these guys. If it were only that easy, huh? If only. Thanks. God bless.